Hey everyone, my name is Jyotsna, and today I want to talk to you about names. Now normally I don't go by Jyotsna, but rather by Jo. And that comes from years of being called Jyotsna, Jyotsna, but most often just what? By people who haven't met me before. But for all of us, we've probably had some sort of encounter at a coffee shop or a Starbucks or with a substitute teacher where we've had someone mispronounce or misspell our names, and that's a fairly common occurrence. But it's when we have sustained interactions with people, whether that be colleagues at work, friends, or even teachers, that pronouncing a name becomes so vital. A name is so essential to who someone is, and it represents everything about them. A name has so much value, and that's exactly why I want to talk to you about why we should learn to appreciate everyone's names, but also why we should disassociate some of the ideas that we have about names. So, a name, what is it? It's a word or phrase that constitutes a distinctive designation of a person or a thing. And even if that sounds complicated, it's not. A name is what designates you and makes you different from anyone else on this planet. Other than life itself, it's one of the few things that everyone has. And like life itself, a name is so important and valuable, regardless of who someone is, or where they're from, or their background. It's something that all of us have. But because it's so common, we don't often realize the importance that it can have. A name is so representative of a person. It has a whole life story behind it. That's exactly why we need to look at and appreciate everyone's names. Now, living in the United States and in such a culturally diverse area, all of us get to experience a wide plethora of different cultures and names. But a name like mine is definitely uncommon compared to a more common Anglo-American name. And that's perfectly all right. But it's these unique names that contribute to our societies in a meaningful way. Rather than silencing these names, we should appreciate and embrace them. Now, this process of silencing names started in colonial times, when slave owners would change the names of their slaves from something that was harder to say to something a lot more common, and in the process, silence those names. And while we don't often do this process to this day, when we mispronounce or misunderstand someone's name, it's like we're silencing their identity and their sense of who they are. It's important that we appreciate and embrace all the names in our society, regardless of what they are. Along with appreciating different names, though, we should also look past just what a name is. Much like how the title of a book describes its story, a name describes so much about a person. But a title doesn't give away the whole plot. Just like a name doesn't allow us to get to know a person completely. It's the very first step, and it's only by understanding and appreciating everyone's names can we truly get to know them for who they are. It's important that we really get to know them beyond just what their name is. Now, along with these names, we also have prejudices, many of which we don't often realize. When we go throughout our daily lives, we pick up on thoughts and ideas and subconsciously form opinions about names in our own brains before we even realize it. And often when we're meeting new people, we're projecting our thoughts and ideas about how they should act before we can truly get to know them for who they are. And to demonstrate this to you, I want to do a little exercise. I'm going to say a name, and I want you to think of the very first thing that pops into your head. Karen. I'll give you a few moments to think about it. Now, most of you probably thought of someone like this, a middle-aged white woman. Now, my apologies to everyone with the name Karen out there. I have a really good friend with this name, and she's an amazing person. But this name can spark a whole image and an attitude, often before we even realize it. When we meet someone with the name Karen, rather than really looking at them for who they are, we often project this idea and this stereotype onto them before we've even gotten a chance to know them. And that's precisely why we need to separate some of the ideas that we have associated with names to truly get to know people even better. But these prejudices are even more critical when we come across people with names that aren't traditionally Anglo-American. When we meet people with names that are Asian or African or Latin American, we often associate these stereotypes associated with these people with their names too. And it doesn't allow us to get to know people for who they truly are. And because of these stereotypes, people may feel forced to act a certain way, to show that they don't fit this stereotype, and others may feel forced to act another way, to show that they do fit that stereotype. But regardless of how people act, much like this elephant trying to sit on a tree, they're trying to do something that they aren't. Elephants aren't birds, and people can't fit into stereotypes that aren't true to who they are. That's exactly why we need to look past and disassociate the ideas that we have associated with these stereotypes. And that's why we need to embrace and appreciate everyone's names, regardless of what it is. But unfortunately, due to these stereotypes, we often have unfortunate consequences. In one study, some economists looked at how the pronunciation of names affected careers in lawyers. And what they found was striking. People with easier to pronounce names rose up the ranks more easily than people with names that were harder to pronounce. People with easier names were being advantaged for something that none of us can control. Much like how we can't control or choose our parents, we can't choose our names either. And while this study didn't directly look at Anglo-American versus non-Anglo-American names, it's easy to realize that people with these names will be advantaged simply because these names are more common and we encounter them on a daily basis. But it's really these unique names that make our society so diverse. It's people with names that are from all around the world that make our communities so unique. And these people also contribute to our society in a meaningful and unique way. And we can't disadvantage someone solely because of that. But most often, it's not just in our careers that these names can have an impact on. It's in our daily lives. When I lived in Iowa, I had plenty of friends with names that were traditionally Asian, Indian, Korean, or Japanese. But in school, they went with a more westernized name. And I've often asked them why they felt the need or had the desire to change their name from something that was so unique to something a lot more common. And their response was always the same. They said that they felt the need to change their name because their old names were too different, and it didn't allow them to fit into school or felt that they couldn't be successful with these names. And this whole stereotype about these names is false, because everyone should be able to fit in regardless of their names. And when people change their names to try to be something that they aren't, it's harmful. Just like how this fish is trying to jump out of water, people can't be forced into something they're not. That's why we need to appreciate and embrace everyone's name, regardless of what it is. It's truly when we appreciate these names and learn to pronounce them that these people feel validated and accepted, that they're free to do whatever they want because of their name, so that they're not restricted by it. That's precisely why we need to understand and appreciate names. A name has so much meaning and value to a person, and it's only when we can accept these names and disassociate some of the ideas that we have that we can truly get to know people even better. So the next time you see a name that sounds complicated, just remember that it can't be as hard as this Icelandic city's name. So take a chance and say it. Thank you for your time.